Woo, welcome back to the second hour of Lovebabz, Love Talk. I'm delighted. I've got my bestie friend, our resident Yoruba priest. Hey, Enroue, how are you? Happy
Hey,
Juneteenth.
Babs. Happy Juneteenth. And it's actually Juneteenth. Look at that. How are you today?
I'm good. Listen, I'm anxious to get outside.
It's not gray and damp and rainy.
It's not raining for now.
Yes, it will rain again. That's how weather
Yes,
works,
yes,
particularly in New England.
yes, yes.
All right. Well, let's start as we do with some honoring of our ancestors, giving thanks for the gifts, the blessings, the ashe that they have left for us, that they've passed on to us. And those gifts and those blessings and those tendencies and skills and abilities and the good things that come from them, we are using them today also. Iba ba ba to fun wa she o. Iba ba ba to fun wa she. Iba ba ba to fun wa she o. Iba ba ba to fun wa she. Ashe te fun wa lan lo yo. Iba ba ba to fun wa she. Iba ye ye to fun wa she o. Iba ye ye to fun wa she. Iba ye ye to fun wa she o. Iba ye ye to fun wa she. Ashe te fun wa lan lo yo. Iba ye ye to fun wa she. Iba egungun to fun wa she o. Iba egungun to fun wa she. Iba egungun to fun wa she o. Iba egungun to fun wa she. Ashe te fun wa lan lo yo. Iba egungun to fun wa she. Iba egungun to fun wa she. Iba egungun to fun wa she. Ashe, ashe,
Yeah,
ashe.
man. Woo! What are we talking about on this fine and glorious Juneteenth?
So I thought we would talk about liberation,
Ooh,
and since it's Juneteenth, and actually a story that comes from one of the verses of Ifa. So I'm a priest of Ifa in the Yoruba tradition, and within that, there's a particular sacred body of sacred literature, also called Ifa. There's other sacred literature that comes out of other Merendilogun, another form of divination, but this comes out of Ifa, and it's in an Odu, which is a particular signature or book in that corpus. So there are 256 Odu within the sacred literature of Ifa, and each one is like a book. And within each book, there are countless verses of sacred literature, 400, 800, so many. And as a priest or priestess of Ifa, we try to learn those stories and those verses to use them in ceremony, in spiritual readings, in situations like today. So I wanted to share one of the stories from one of those books, one of those Odu. The name of that Odu is called Ogbe Oyeku, and is this story of a priest who goes to the land of white people. And he goes there as like they invite him there, and he goes there as a priest. And this was at a time when white people were living more in harmony with the land, and in particular with the ocean. And he stayed with them for a while and practiced with them and they learned from him. And then at some point, he was trying to leave, and they prevented him from leaving. prevented him from leaving, and they captured him, and then they enslaved him. And they forced him, in this particular house, they forced him to cook for them. And as happened here also, right, very often, like the people who were cooking the food when we were enslaved, we couldn't eat that food. And so he's cooking all this wonderful food, but not allowed to eat any of it. And one day they asked him to cook this huge fish, massive, massive fish. And he's cooking it, and he tastes a little bit of it because it just looks so wonderful and it's so big. And he just like pulls a little bit off and tastes it, and it tastes so good and so sweet. And he's like, wow, it's so big. They're not going to notice if I just eat a little bit, but I have to be careful. So he's like, take a little bit from here, a little from here. And then he's like, well, I can't take any more from like the outside of the fish because they'll notice that I've been eating this fish. So he reaches inside, takes a little bit from the inside, and it's still wonderful and sweet and glorious. And little by little, he kind of crawls into the fish, and he's eating it from the inside. And one of the people who have enslaved him comes into the kitchen, and so he gets very quiet. And this person's looking around for him and calling his name, and they can't find him. And they see this fish, and they're like, this fish isn't even finished. And they take the fish, and they put it back in the oven. And the priest who was in there was afraid to come out, right? So that it was known what he was doing. And he stays in there, and he eventually dies. And among the Yoruba, there's actually the name of that priest is the same name that they used to call this tiny little insect that they find inside of certain fish. So obviously this is a bad thing. This is a warning. But I wanted to share it a little bit for today about these notions of liberation. And the warning is, not to be so enamored and pulled into the sweetness of what the people who have oppressed us and have enslaved us have for us, right? It's important that we not get too caught up in consuming that sweetness, thinking that it is something for us, because in the end, we will be consumed by it, and we will be harmed by it. And even if we think we're free, right? We have what are the notions of liberation, right? The celebration of Juneteenth is to be vigilant around what are we consuming, so that we don't lose ourselves in that pull for the sweetness, right? Because we taste something that's sweet, and it's like our body's like, yes, that's so good. We just want more. And so we have to be really careful about not losing ourselves in the pursuit of the sweetness that this oppressive culture is creating. Even if we are participating in its creation of it, we have to make sure we don't get lost in it and lose ourselves.
Wow, that's a big story.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So what does that make you think of, Babz? I'll turn this on you for a moment.
I see the point of it. I absolutely do see the point of it. But man,
yeah,
that's a harsh penalty, I think.
Yeah.
Well, aren't they all though? Aren't they all?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. Like, if we lose ourselves, even if we, if we leave the verse for a minute, like, what is liberation, right? Is it the ability to just, I get to have my piece of the pie just like these people in power have their piece of the pie? But we don't look at what the cost of that is. The cost to our very selves and our communities and our loved ones and our actually our hearts and our souls and our being. We lose if we're just like, freedom is just, I get to grab the piece of the pie. I get to put my flag on top of the hill. I get to be the one in charge. I get to be the one who can kick people down, have power over somebody. That's how we lose ourselves, and we get involved in the same suffering that the people who've caused the harm are doing. And I think that's our part of it, right? We obviously are impacted by so many things, and being free from the chains, right? Bob Marley talking about like being free from mental slavery, or Fela talking about colonial mentality, right? some of the outward things may be gone, but how are we still, even for ourselves, censoring ourselves, limiting ourselves, taking on, internalize these notions of oppression, right? That's the internalization of, oh yeah, my people are actually, I'm the exception to my people, right? Whoever your people are, right? That's the way we internalize these messages, right? I'm the exception. Oh yeah, they don't deserve, they're dumber, it's a lack of willpower, moral character, or things like that. We take on the viewpoints and the perspectives and the values of those who have oppressed us, even as it may seem like, oh, we're getting this thing that is so good, like power, like is intoxicating in that way, right? And so how do we say no to that? Even literal sugar, right? We talk about like literal sweetness and sugar. How do we, let me begin to, whatever supports I need to like not be consuming that so much so that it is actually hurting me. Oh, but it tastes so good. Yes. And everything that tastes good is not good for you, right? Particularly in the ways that our body can crave for something. And it's important that we don't just fall into those cravings unconsciously. Like choosing to have something is different than either unconsciously just consuming it, right? This goes into things around addiction, right? Even like food, right? We're not eating necessarily because we're hungry, but there's this like emotional component of like, I need to feel full. I just want more of that taste. And so we have to own an aspect of that. Not that it is fully our responsibility that we arrived in this place, but we're here. And so what supports do we need? Not just, I just need to do it by myself, but what supports do we need to help us to be well and to be healthy and to think critically about, again, what are we consuming? What do we consume with our devices? What are we consuming? What foods are we consuming? What relationships are we consuming? There's so many things to pay attention to, particularly since this is a culture that is so based on identity and consumption being intertwined, right? What is your identity? Well, these are the things I consume, right? This is what I watch and read and talk about and eat, and I can relate to somebody else who consumes those same things. And all of a sudden, that's my identity. It's a very dangerous path. And I think we have that takes us from, again, what this not knowingness of life and the value and the beauty that's also here, right? Our humanness, our connectedness, our interrelatedness.
That's a pretty good message for Juneteenth as we are in a celebratory mode, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
To be mindful and to be careful about, like the idea, the goal is to stay focused on liberation, not consumption.
Right. Liberation is not, I'm now free to consume whatever I want.
Right.
That's the uber rich do that. Right? The super wealthy. My wife used to be a caterer, and there were a couple times I helped out at some parties that she did. And this was back in, we were in New York, and she told me of that. This was actually, we were in Boston. She was working for a catering company. And she told me there was a party that they threw for, somebody with lots and lots of money. And they had something they called a show pig, where they had a fully cooked pig as a display. Nobody ate it, wasn't meant to be eaten, ended up getting thrown away. And it's this notion of like wealthy means you have the ease and the wealth and the resources to just discard something.
Mm-hmm.
I just have it. I'll just take a little nibble, throw the rest away. Like that's the sign of wealth as it relates to consuming, right? I get to consume what I want and waste what I want. even if the consumption, just like I want it in front of me so it looks spectacular, and then like I'll take a sip of water, and then the rest won't even go to people. And that's an important thing that to unlearn.
Yeah.
That our well-being is based on that. That's something to unlearn and to be careful of, because we can get swallowed by it. Right?
To our demise.
To our demise. Exactly. To our demise. Yeah.
That's that's not a rich person's problem either. It's true on, I would say, at every economic level,
Well, it's
according
the
to.
value, right? So it's the value that we see, oh, that's what success is, and then people internalize that value, even though it actually is leading to their destruction.
Yeah.
Right? Who's suffering more, right? People without means who share those values, right? And it's not that having different values, immediately turns all of your circumstances around, but there's a difference between having your health, self-esteem, well-being anchoring in who you are and your community, and not having economic wealth, right, or even being in poverty, and someone who is in that same situation but is desiring and pulling after all these other values, right? Because then there's no space for themselves as to be even a person. And think about what they really need, not what they imagine they need, right? Like the need isn't so that it looks a certain way. Oh, I have this TV and I have this phone, I have this car, and I have this style. That actually doesn't bring the sense of self and well-being. It's the trappings of it. So not so much to get into this isn't about scolding suffering people, but we also have to be aware of what we choose. And if we want to choose differently, we need help choosing differently, then how do we get help choosing differently? And that's even part of the undoing. Connect with each other. Lean on each other. Create different networks.
Well, that's a growth, right? Like, you hope that's a growth.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have to, be. It's easy, if we don't know there's a world outside of the cage, then we do what we can to make do in there, right? But when we learn there's a world outside of that cage, there's another way of being. Then how do we connect to that? How do we internalize that? And then maybe then I can even start to think creatively, I have a being that is not defined by these circumstances and these conditions. So what do I need? And on that path, okay, so what do I need to do? How do I need to live? What do I need to be nurtured by and nourished by? What different things do I need to consume? Not for the sake of consuming, but we need to eat, right? We need to consume things, right? We learn, we relate to people. But how can those things actually be nourishing instead of empty? There are these interesting experiments with one with flies and landing on a pile of, was it artificial? One of the artificial sweeteners. This was a long time ago, and so the sweetener has no nutritive value. It's like the 0 calorie, right? It has no nutritive value, but it tastes sweet. So the flies will just sit on it all day long, thinking, this is so sweet, this is great, right? Just consuming, and then they starve to death. Because they're not actually taking in calories.
Nutrients, yeah.
Right, it's just sweet, right? Or, experiments when they have this, I think I mentioned this before, where they have sensors connected to the pleasure centers in a monkey or an ape primate of some kind in a lab, which is has its own ethical issues, and that they can choose between like hitting a lever to stimulate the pleasure center, or hit another lever to get food, and they'll do the same thing. They'll just sit hitting the lever to get the pleasure centers stimulated in their brain.
Wow.
So it's not right. That's not an issue of willpower. That's like this. We are wired to pair these things together. Oh, this like sweetness and pleasure from things that are actually nourishing. But in this culture, they've become extracted from each other, where things can just trigger the pleasure center and have no nutritive value, no nourishing value. They're not nurturing at all. But we still, this tastes so good. This is so sweet. Or the dopamine triggers. It's going, I'm scrolling. Oh, what's that? Oh, right. They're locked into our physiology. And so it takes effort. It's like, I'm not going to plug into that.
And that's at the root of addiction, isn't it?
Yeah. And there are reasons why we didn't do that and don't do that, because of the pain that's under there. And so there's pain under there that needs to be addressed. And if we address the pain under there, then the immediate unconscious desire to get the thing that's pleasurable diminishes, because we're like, there's pleasure in these other things, these other ways of being, these other frameworks, right? There's other value systems. So there's healing to be done. If we look at like the pain of enslavement, there's healing to be done so that we as African heritage people can even see the value in African traditions, practices, cultures, not as just this faraway thing, but as something that could have meaning today. And it doesn't mean we have to just jump in and go back and do all the things and have some other like orthodoxy, but to be able to choose to say, what is being fed? Is my wholeness being fed? Is there really a place for all of me here? And what am I leading towards? What is that sweetness calling to me? And is it really sweet? Right? Or is it triggering something else that makes me lose myself and just want to be absorbed? I'm going to crawl inside because I don't want to be caught, and I want to crawl inside this sweet thing and then get lost to it. And it's about, can we look at these things deeply to undo the ways that we become unconscious in it? That we have options, we have choices. I'm hungry. I can choose what I want to eat. I'm stressed. I can choose to deal with the stress instead of burying it under the satisfaction of fullness that comes with eating, even though that actually isn't going to solve deeply what is causing that stress. It may bury it for the moment. It may hide it for the moment, right? It's like, I hit the lever, pleasure center's triggered, wonderful, it's all great. But the thing is still there. The discomfort is still there. The anxiety that arises is still there. The loneliness, it may still be there. Right? The fear. So, as we look to today, let us continue to look at like a celebration and what will help this continue to move so that next year I'm a little freer. right? Not just like, yay, celebration, back to the thing, yay, celebration, back to that's like hitting a lever, like, yay, pleasure, this is really great, ooh, back.
I I I kind of like thinking about Juneteenth the way people think about New Year's, but
Mm,
Juneteenth as uh, what will I do for my own liberation and the liberation of my community? Like,
yeah,
how do I put that into a tangible thing that I can move toward and then revisit it sort of next year? It's like, on
yeah,
Juneteenth last year, I said this, and this is what I did.
yeah,
And you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
give it some real,
yeah,
like not just a celebration, but a way to sort of celebrate and, you
yeah.
know, do some stuff.
It actually makes me think also of in Judaism, Passover, right? So there's this time that's a remembering of, being enslaved and then being freed, and retelling that story, and this appreciation and recognition of like, well, where am I still enslaved today? Where am I free today? And I think there's some power in that, in the different traditions have so many different things. I would love to see more of that in here in the Black community, of like, can we really wrestle with a remembering, not just to lose ourselves in pain, but in this like remembering, particularly during a time of celebration of being free, right? It's like, oh, now all of us are like on the books free, right? Okay, so let's remember that time, and not just the time of enslavement, but like the time actually, even what did that do? Oh, that drove out our humanity, which is who we were before we were enslaved. And so, not just a remembering of the enslavement, but a remembering of our humanity and the groundedness in culture and values, completely different from this in so many ways of what we find ourselves in now. And so, how do we draw from that well of practices that continue to support our personhood? So in the remembering, it's like, oh yes, and these are the things that help us to remember our personhood that we are now marking today and carrying forward. So our liberation is like, oh, we want to now reclaim this personhood and these practices and these values and these viewpoints, to continue to be free, to choose what is actually nourishing and nurturing and what is not. What is that sweetness that we can't deny that it's sweet, but it may not be so good for us as
Mm.
like something we blindly consume, right? Again, not like an all or none, but like, am I hungry or am I stressed? How am I feeling? Right? That requires that first question. How am I feeling? Let's just celebrate. Why do you want to? Oh, what? I can be in a celebration, like feel sad, because that's isn't that also part of being free, right? I am free to feel the range of my feelings, and to have skill and support in being with all those feelings. Isn't that also free?
Mhm.
Or are we saying that freedom is only conditional? It looks a certain way, right? It sounds a certain way. Oh, you have to behave a certain way, articulate yourself a certain way, express yourself a certain way. That doesn't sound very free. So,
I like that.
yeah, explore. Well, we started off connecting with our ancestors as we always do, right? So this connection, even tapping into like what is liberation for them? Am I living in a way that's more spacious, more present, freer, healthier than they were? Relationships, physical, spiritual health, mental health. What can I do? How can I partner and encourage other people and be encouraged by other people to find those things that help me to be well, to have courage to face difficult things, but also to really be joyous and celebrate as well the fullness of who we are, the breadth and diversity of who we are.
Good. That's a good message for Juneteenth.
Right?
I think there's a very reflective message. Because I know
I like that.
I love a celebration. I love a celebration. But I find that for Juneteenth, it needs to be not just a celebration, but it needs to have some reflective component to it.
I think that would really add something in particular. So it's not just like, oh, now we get to have this food and this barbecue and this cookout and this gathering. Well, what else can it be infused with?
Yeah. And I get the sense that people yearn for that, like, because I've seen so many different kinds of Juneteenth kinds of celebratory things over the years, and I see people moving more toward a reflective, yes, celebrate and have all the food and the.
Right, that's good.
But really ground themselves, almost like a Thanksgiving kind of, how we've taken Thanksgiving away from it being about Indians and pilgrims, and we've made it a coming home and catching up with our loved ones around a meal that we prepared together,
Right.
And we think about our families, not so much about that fake origin story of
right,
colonization, but
right,
a different model of that,
Yeah.
So Juneteenth feels like that to me. Like, it's not the 4th of July. It's not all that. It's very. It seems very intentional about how we celebrate it.
Yeah. And it then opens up, right? Since it's a national holiday, we get to open it up.
Yeah.
On like, what does liberation mean, right? What does it mean to be free here? That's something we can all be asking ourselves as ICE is running rampant, as the economy is doing what it's doing, as people are suffering, as surveillance and things increase. What does liberation mean now? That's it. That's something we can all be reflecting on.
Yeah. What does liberation mean now?
Mm-hmm.
Once upon a time, it was to get rid of the chains.
Right.
Then it was.
What does liberty and justice for all really mean?
There's no finer time to ask than right now in the turmoil of everything.
Right.
Right.
Right. Because some people are saying, well, it's not really for all. I mean, that's also been the nature of this country, right? Well, it's not really for all. Well,
yes. Yeah. Harry goes, things that make you go,
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Harry.
Well, thank you for the contemplative vibe today around Juneteenth.
Thank you, Babs.
I appreciate that.
Thanks, Babs. And happy Juneteenth!
Happy Juneteenth, baby! So I know I will see you soon.
Yes. Take care. Be well. Be well, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, Harry.
Love.